What did you just say? I stared at her. Laura didn't look at me. Instead, she reached out and looped her arm around the men beside her. Don't get so worked up. She frowned. It's just for show. Once the heat dies down, I'll divorce him and still marry you in the end. I let out a short laugh, but my voice turned cold. Then what am I? She finally looked at me, a hint of impatience in her eyes. Aren't you always the rational one? If Fernando gets forced into marrying that paralyzed woman, his life is basically over. So, I asked, so help me, you should understand. That was when I realized she wasn't asking. She was informing me. She had already decided my place for me. Chapter 01. Hubby, let's put our wedding on hold for now. I'll marry Fernando first. You can understand, right? The moment those words fell, my mind blanked for a second. The crystal chandelier in the living room was blindingly bright. Laura stood in front of me, her makeup flawless, her tone gentle, as if she were talking about something utterly ordinary. She didn't even wait for me to respond before turning slightly and linking arms with Fernando. The motion was too natural, so natural it felt like they had rehearsed it countless times. Ease. Just think of it as helping me. She looked at me, a trace of pleading in her brows, yet without hesitation. If Fernando really gets forced by the Sun family to marry that paralyzed woman, his life will be ruined. That was when I truly came back to my senses. Ruined. Then what about me? Help you. My throat tightened, but my gaze grew sharper. Then what am I? I shook off her hand, not forcefully, but enough to make her pause. We grew up together. Our marriage was arranged by both families. Half a year ago, news of our engagement had already spread across the entire social circle. My voice stayed low. Now you're breaking it off. And the person you want to marry is a scholarship kid your family sponsored. Have you thought about me? About my family? About how people in the company will look at me? I am Ezekiel Law, the current head of the law group. This engagement was never just about feelings. Laura frowned slightly, as if my questions annoyed her, but she still forced herself to explain. You're overthinking it. I'm just going through the motions with Fernando first. Once things settle down, I'll divorce him and marry you in the end. She spoke quickly, like she had rehearsed this answer long ago. We've been together for so many years. What difference could it make? I stared at her and suddenly felt like I was looking at a stranger. Her so-called just for show meant turning me into a complete joke in front of everyone. Her no difference assumed I would stand there and wait for her, no matter what. Fernando had been silent the whole time. He stood beside her, wearing an ill-fitting suit, his back straight, yet his gaze remained lowered. It was a subtle posture, like he was avoiding something, or waiting for someone else to speak for him. I knew him. Fernando, the scholarship student sponsored by the Mu family. Excellent grades, quiet personality. Over the years, he came and went from the Mu household more often than many relatives, but I had never imagined that one day, he would stand here, in this role. You think I'd agree to this? I asked. Chapter 02. Laura's expression froze for a moment, then quickly relaxed again. You will, she said with certainty. You've always been rational, and the most sensible. Sensible. The word landed lightly, almost weightless, across my face. She wasn't asking me, she was assigning me a role. All of a sudden, a flood of past memories surfaced. The dates she canceled last minute, I had my assistant rearrange my schedule. When she was in a bad mood, I pushed aside meetings to stay with her. When she said Fernando had it tough, I gave him an internship. Again and again, I gave in, and she took it all for granted. Then have you ever considered the possibility that I don't understand? I asked. She was clearly caught off guard. Ezekiel, don't be like this. I don't have a choice either. When she said that, her hand was still resting on Fernando's arm. I looked at that hand and suddenly found it ironic. The one who doesn't have a choice is me, isn't it? I let out a faint smile, devoid of emotion. You agreed to the engagement. Your family announced it, and now you're the one backing out. And with just a no choice, you expect me to swallow all of it. Laura's patience finally ran out. Why do you have to make it sound so awful? I've already been considerate of your feelings. I nodded. Considerate. Considerate enough to stand in front of me and say she was going to marry someone else. Fernando finally spoke. President Law. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. I'm the one who's wrong here. As he said that, he finally raised his eyes to look at me. There was something complicated in them. Guilt, nervousness, and a trace of deeply suppressed expectation. I understood. He was waiting for me to step back. You don't need to apologize to me, I said calmly. Who you marry has nothing to do with me. His expression stiffened, but Laura let out a breath of relief, thinking my stance had softened. Ezekiel, I knew you'd understand. Once this passes, you're overthinking it. I cut her off. The living room fell silent. My understanding ends here. Her face changed. What do you mean? I looked at her and spoke, word by word. From the moment you decided to marry him, whatever we had is already over. She opened her mouth, as if to argue, but no words came out immediately. She had probably never imagined I would say something like this. All these years, she had grown used to me standing on her side. Don't be impulsive. This is only temporary. You don't need to explain anymore. My tone remained calm. Which path you choose is up to you. I turned, picked up my coat, and didn't look at them again. When I reached the door, I paused briefly. This ends here. Chapter 03. The moment the door closed behind me, I didn't look back. It wasn't that I wasn't angry. I was, but I knew that saying even one more word would only push things further in the direction she wanted. My car had just left the Mu family villa complex when my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen was Laura Mu's mother. I didn't answer right away. Streetlights swept past outside the window, their reflections stretching into long streaks across the windshield. Yet my thoughts were unusually clear. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had simply been waiting for the right time to say it out loud. The phone rang a third time before I finally answered. Ezekiel. Her voice was gentle, deliberately lowered. Don't take what happened just now to heart. I kept one hand on the steering wheel, my tone calm. If you have something to say, you can say it directly. There was a brief pause on the other end. Laura is still young. She's soft-hearted. She can't stand to see others suffer. You know Fernando's situation. He truly has no way out. I listened without interrupting. You're someone meant for bigger things. Why bother arguing with a child? If this gets out, it won't be good for anyone. Not good for anyone. I understood exactly what she meant. And among those people, the Mu family was not included. So, I asked. She clearly hadn't expected me to respond that way. Her tone faltered slightly. Our families have shared so many years of ties. We can't let this ruin everything over a temporary matter. Take a step back, and naturally others will remember your grace. Take a step back. I let out a quiet laugh. Auntie, the engagement was proposed by your side. The timeline was set by your side. And now, the ones who want to change it are also you. This is not a step I should be the one to take. Her tone turned noticeably colder. Ezekiel, don't make things so absolute. You're emotional right now. Think about it again after you calm down. I didn't respond further. I hung up directly. The moment the call ended, my mind became even clearer. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to pressure me. Early the next morning, as soon as I arrived at the company, my assistant followed me into the office. President Law, several members of the board are asking about the wedding, and there are already some rumors spreading outside. I took off my coat, my tone indifferent. That's normal. Respond according to procedure. No need to explain too much. My assistant nodded, though he hesitated. There's one more thing. The Mu family wants to arrange a dinner. I looked up at him. Decline it. They said it's just a family gathering. Then it's even less necessary. I sat down and began reviewing documents, as if nothing had happened. But in a company like this, there were always eyes watching. During the morning meeting, the moment I stepped into the conference room, several gazes landed on me at once. Curiosity, sympathy, and barely concealed interest. I acted as if I didn't notice and took my seat directly. The meeting went smoothly. Projects, funding, timelines, everything proceeded without the slightest deviation. Someone cautiously probed. President Law has been dealing with quite a few personal matters lately. I closed the file and looked up at him. Personal matters don't affect business. If you're concerned about the project, you can stay after and discuss it with me. The men immediately fell silent. Chapter 04. After the meeting ended, someone deliberately stayed behind. Ezekiel, how are you planning to handle this? It was one of the company's veterans. Someone who had followed me for many years. I didn't bother with detours. I'll handle it by the rules. Whoever it belongs to, that's whose responsibility it is. He looked at me, nodded, but let out a sigh. That temper of yours, still the same as ever. At noon, I didn't go to the cafeteria. I had a simple meal in my office. My phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. I answered. The voice on the other end sounded a bit uneasy. President Law, this is Fernando. I leaned back in my chair and said nothing. About Laura. I want to explain. I know you're not feeling well about it. Explain what? I asked. He clearly choked for a moment. I didn't mean for things to turn out like this. If the Sun family hadn't pushed so hard, I wouldn't have. Fernando. I cut him off. He stopped. In your current position, you don't need to explain anything to me. You're getting married. It's not my place to approve it. Silence hung on the other end for several seconds. But I don't want you to misunderstand. Laura, she still has feelings for you. At that, I finally frowned slightly. Her feelings have nothing to do with me, and your choices don't need my blessing. I hung up, not giving him another chance to continue. That afternoon, someone from the Mu family still came. It wasn't Laura Mu, it was her father. When he appeared at my office door, his expression was far calmer than it had been over the phone the night before. Ezekiel, let's talk. I gestured for my assistant to leave. Once the door closed, he got straight to the point. Our family didn't think this through carefully, but now that things are already set in motion, if you keep resisting, it won't benefit you. Then who does it benefit? I asked. He paused briefly. At the very least, it won't make things too ugly. I looked at him. You think it's ugly now because I'm not cooperating. If I nodded along, the ones looking bad wouldn't be you. His expression shifted slightly. You're forcing us. I'm not forcing anyone. You're the ones making the choice. The air turned tense for a moment. He stood up, lowering his voice. Ezekiel, feelings can be cultivated again, but once a position is lost, it's hard to regain. I stood up as well, my tone just as calm. Positions like that are never something others give up for you. He looked at me for a long time. In the end, he said nothing and turned to leave. Chapter 05. I didn't hear about Laura's wedding from her. It was my assistant who mentioned it in passing while handing me my schedule. President Law. Tonight's business reception is at Peach Club. He paused. At the same time, the Mu family is holding a wedding. I nodded and took the file. Stick to the original plan. My assistant didn't ask anything further. The Mu family's wedding was kept deliberately low-key. The venue was a relatively inconspicuous hotel in the south of the city. The guest list was tightly controlled, carefully avoiding anyone connected to the Law family. That arrangement alone said a lot. They didn't want to make things big, but they still intended to see it through. I didn't go. After the afternoon meeting, I went straight back to my office and changed into a different suit. The person in the mirror looked no different from usual. The suit was well-tailored, the tie a darker shade, with no unnecessary decoration. I stood there for a few seconds, confirming my composure was intact before heading out. Peach Club was brightly lit. The moment I entered, a few acquaintances stopped me. President Law, long time no see. Working on any big projects lately? I responded briefly, neither warm nor cold. Soon, I noticed something subtle about the atmosphere. People's gazes lingered on me longer than usual. Some hesitated to speak, others simply pretended not to know anything. I didn't need to guess what they were thinking. They were waiting for me to show some emotion. Disappointment, anger, anything. As long as I wasn't composed enough, it would be interpreted as something else. I had no intention of giving them that. Halfway through the reception, someone approached me with a glass of wine. It was an investment partner I had worked with once. President Law, I heard there's been something going on in your personal life. I looked at him, my tone steady. Personal matters. He smiled, as if relieved. That's good. I was worried it might affect our cooperation. It won't. The project continues as planned. He nodded, visibly at ease. That kind of reaction was more honest than any words of comfort. What they cared about was never how I felt. It was whether I could still stand in the same position as before. I raised my glass and made a simple round of social exchanges, discussing projects, progress, next steps. Every sentence landed exactly where it should. Finally, someone couldn't hold back. President Law, you seem to be in good shape tonight. I glanced at him. In a work setting, shouldn't I be? He froze for a moment, then smiled and nodded. My mistake. I didn't press further, nor did I explain. The reception ended earlier than expected. As I was leaving, I ran into a familiar board member at the entrance. He looked at me, his expression complicated. You didn't go to the Mu family's wedding? No, I said. They got married today. I know. He was silent for a few seconds. You're taking this quite well. I adjusted my cuff. No need to spend time on places I shouldn't be. He had nothing to say, only nodded. As the car drove away from the club, I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for a while. My phone had been quiet the entire time. It only lit up when I was almost home. A message from an unknown number. Very short. You really didn't come. I glanced at it and didn't reply. At a moment like this, anything I said would be unnecessary. Chapter 06. After I got home, I took a shower and changed into casual clothes. Outside the window, the night was quiet. The city lights seemed sealed off beyond the glass. I sat on the sofa and sent my assistant a message, asking him to move up tomorrow's schedule. Just as I put my phone down, the doorbell rang. I got up and opened the door, only to see Laura standing outside. She was wearing a simple white dress, no longer the elaborate look from the wedding, but she looked a little worn out. Her makeup was gone, her eyes slightly red. What are you doing here? I asked. She looked at me, as if trying to find something on my face. I thought you would come, she said softly. Why would you think that? I asked in return. She bit her lip. We've known each other for so many years. After all, I stepped aside and made room. Come in and talk. She walked in, her gaze sweeping across the living room. Everything here was familiar to her. She used to come whenever she wanted. Now, she seemed a little uneasy. Is the wedding over? I asked. She nodded. Yeah. Did it go smoothly? She paused before answering. It was fine. I didn't press further. Silence settled in the living room, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Why didn't you come tonight? She finally asked. I had plans, I said. More important than the wedding. I looked at her. To me, yes. Her expression changed instantly. Are you just being spiteful? No, I'm just being clear about priorities. She looked at me, as if truly examining me for the first time. You're really not upset at all? I didn't answer immediately. Being upset doesn't solve anything. You're already married. No matter how I feel, it won't change that. Her fingers tightened slightly. You weren't like this before. I thought a lot of things could be negotiated. Now I realize some things can't. She stood up, as if she wanted to say something, but stopped herself. Then what about us, going forward? I stood up as well. We live our own lives. She looked at me, her eyes gradually reddening. You're really not going to fight for me one more time? I shook my head. There's no need. Chapter 07. After that, Laura and I rarely had any contact. It wasn't intentional avoidance, our lives simply drifted apart on their own. I put more time into the company. Projects moved forward quickly, meetings filled my schedule, and I was switching between negotiation tables almost every day. Being busy had its advantages, it left no space for emotions. Occasionally, someone would mention her. I treated it as if I hadn't heard. Her name, to me, was no longer something that required a response. The first time I saw her again was at an informal setting. In the evening, I had just finished a business meeting and was saying goodbye to a partner at the restaurant entrance. The moment I turned around, I saw Laura not far away. She stood by the roadside, holding 2 shopping bags, looking a little tired. Beside her stood Fernando. He was speaking in a low voice, his tone tense, brows tightly furrowed. Laura stood slightly turned toward him, listening, her face showing clear impatience, yet she held back from interrupting. That scene made me pause for a moment, not because of lingering feelings, but because the contrast was too stark. In the past, she would never have to stand by the roadside waiting for someone, nor would anyone speak to her in that tone. She noticed me soon enough. Her eyes lit up for a split second, then quickly dimmed. She opened her mouth as if to call out to me, but Fernando pulled her slightly. Watch where you're going, he said, his voice carrying restrained irritation. Laura frowned. I can watch myself. He didn't say anything further, but his displeasure was obvious. I didn't go over, nor did I greet them. At a moment like that, my presence would only be unnecessary. As my car drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. She was still standing there, no longer looking at me, her head lowered as she spoke to Fernando. After that day, she called me once. It was on a weekday evening. I had just gotten home. My phone rang for a long time. When I saw her name, I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. Ezekiel. Her voice was soft, tinged with fatigue. Do you need something? I asked. There was a brief silence on the other end. Have you been busy lately? I've been fine. I had no interest in small talk. I want to ask you something. She spoke slowly, as if choosing her words carefully. Fernando, when he interned at your company before, was his performance okay? I frowned slightly. Is that something you should be asking me? She seemed to choke on her words. I just wanted to confirm. He's under a lot of pressure right now. His mood hasn't been great. I stayed silent for a few seconds. His work ability has nothing to do with your marriage. If there's a problem, you should deal with it yourselves. A faint sigh came from the other end. You didn't use to talk like this. The premise that allowed that no longer exists. I said calmly. You're married now. There are boundaries that should be clear. She didn't say anything else. A few seconds later, the call ended. At that moment, I suddenly realized she wasn't really asking about Fernando. She was trying to find a sense of familiarity she used to have. Later, her messages became scattered. Not continuous outpourings, but occasional, seemingly casual questions. For example, the background of a certain business partner, or small details in a contract that were easy to overlook. In the past, she would mention these things in passing, and I would handle them for her. Now, I mostly didn't reply, and when I did, it was usually just a simple sentence. You can ask your husband about that. Chapter 08. After a few times, she finally stopped. From scattered remarks by others, I gradually pieced together her current situation. It wasn't that I was trying to find out, our circle was simply too small. People mentioned that the atmosphere in the Mu family hadn't been good lately. Fernando's mood had become unstable, and he was especially sensitive to how others looked at him. He didn't like people bringing up sponsorship or his background, nor did he want to be seen as an attachment to the Mu family. But reality made those things impossible to avoid. Caught in the middle, Laura began clashing with her family more and more often. She had originally thought that marriage would simply mean a different way of living. She hadn't expected to be worn down by countless daily details. By chance, I ran into her again in a parking lot. She was sitting alone in her car, the window half open, holding her phone, staring blankly. As I passed by, she looked up and saw me, clearly startled. I had intended to leave directly, but she got out of the car. Ezekiel, she called out. I stopped. Do you need something? She walked a few steps closer, her complexion not looking well. You seem to be doing pretty well lately. Work is going fine, I replied politely. She looked at me and suddenly smiled, but it was forced. Do you think I look ridiculous now? I'm not in a position to judge your life, I said. That was your choice. Her eyes reddened slightly. At the time, I really just wanted to help him. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. It's not that you didn't expect it. You just didn't want to think about it back then. She fell silent. Fernando has changed, she said quietly. He wasn't like this before. I looked at her but didn't respond. He always feels like people look down on him. Even the smallest things get brought up over and over again. You used to tell me how to deal with things like this. She looked up at me. Now you don't say anything at all, because that's not my responsibility anymore, I said. My tone wasn't harsh, but it was clear. It was as if that sentence struck her. She stood there, unable to speak. After a long while, she finally asked, "Did I make the wrong choice?" I didn't answer. The question itself had no meaning. She waited for a moment, but no answer came. The emotion in her eyes gradually collapsed. "Forget it." She forced a smile. "I shouldn't have asked you." She turned and got back into her car, closing the door a bit too hard. Before the car started, she gave me one last look. There was none of her former certainty, none of her old confidence, only clear panic. I stood there, watching her car disappear from sight. There was no ripple in my heart. She was finally beginning to realize. The rescue she believed in was not something everyone would cherish, and she herself was being worn down, little by little. For the first time, she was truly afraid. Chapter 09. During that period, my life gradually returned to its original rhythm. It wasn't something I deliberately adjusted. Things were simply falling back into the way they were supposed to run. The company entered a new phase. Several projects were moving forward in parallel, and I personally followed up on one of the acquisition deals. The other company had a complicated background, and the negotiations dragged on. After several rounds, both sides were wearing down each other's patience. The first time I met Vanessa was at one of those meetings. She sat across from me, not in a prominent position, but very quiet. She didn't flip through the documents quickly, nor did she speak much. But every time she did, it landed exactly where it mattered. I noticed her because she interrupted one of her own executives. "This doesn't hold," she said calmly, but with certainty. "If we go down this path, the risks will be amplified later." The other party was clearly unconvinced and pushed back. She didn't argue. She simply slid the document forward slightly. "The data is here. This isn't about stance, it's about cost." The room fell into a brief silence. At that moment, I looked up at her. She wasn't the kind of person who showed off sharpness, but her judgment was decisive, without unnecessary emotion. After the meeting, I asked my assistant to take a closer look at her profile. Vanessa, one of the actual decision-makers of the other company. Her background was clean, her experience clear, with no signs of deliberate embellishment. The second time we met was a one-on-one working session. She arrived 10 minutes early and had already listed all the points for discussion. Some terms can be pushed further, but there are two that cannot be touched. I looked at her. Why? It's not about making concessions. It's about leaving room for future cooperation. Her explanation wasn't long, but it was clear. Conversations like that made things easier. "You know this project well," I said. "This is my job," she replied naturally. "Same as you." She didn't test boundaries, nor did she try to get closer on purpose. All communication stayed exactly where it should. After the meeting, she gathered her materials and prepared to leave. I suddenly asked, "Do you have time tonight? Let's have dinner." She paused, not answering immediately. "If it's an extension of work, that's fine. If not, I'd like to make that clear in advance." I looked at her and ended up smiling. "Just dinner, no personal matters." She nodded. "Then that works." The restaurant was ordinary, chosen not for appearances. She made no comment about the setting. While ordering, she glanced at me. "Any dietary restrictions?" "No." She nodded and didn't ask further. The meal was quiet, but not awkward. She didn't probe into my past, nor did she try to present herself deliberately. The conversation stayed centered on work, but it wasn't dull. Her views on many things unexpectedly aligned with mine, not out of agreement for its own sake, but because we approach things from similar angles. "You have high standards for partners," she suddenly said. "Because I don't want repeated drain," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Same here." In that moment, I realized she didn't need to be taken care of. She knew what she wanted and where her boundaries were. After dinner, she took the initiative to pay. "You can get the next one," she said naturally. I didn't refuse. That sense of balance was comfortable. The next few interactions all felt natural. Sometimes it was project discussions, sometimes just a coffee along the way. She never appeared at inappropriate times, nor did she bring personal emotions into work. Once, I had to cancel a meeting last minute due to a schedule delay. She only replied, "Got it, another day." Then, no questions, no emotions. I suddenly realized that in this kind of relationship, I didn't need to explain much. One afternoon, the project reached a critical stage. We were in the conference room reviewing the final version of the proposal. It took a while. Outside, the sky slowly darkened. She closed the file and glanced at the time. Let's stop here for today. We'll handle the rest tomorrow. I nodded. All right. She stood up, then added. You seem more relaxed lately. I looked up at her. Do I? Yes, she said with certainty. No one stays that tense forever. I didn't deny it. She didn't press further. That kind of measured concern was rare. Before leaving, she suddenly asked, do you have plans this weekend? Not at the moment. If you're willing, we could go see an exhibition, she said calmly. Not work-related. I looked at her and didn't hesitate. Sure. Chapter 10. I noticed the change after a very ordinary business social. That night, Vanessa and I left the club together. The project had reached a temporary conclusion, and she seemed more relaxed than usual, her tone more casual. I might not be in the city tomorrow, she said. There's an internal meeting. All right. I nodded. We'll meet again when you're back. She responded briefly, said nothing more, and turned to get into her car. The taillights disappeared at the intersection. I stood there for a few seconds before getting back into my own car. I was very comfortable with this kind of rhythm. Not clingy, not distant, just both of us clearly aware of where the other stood. The next day at noon, I had just finished a meeting when my assistant knocked and came in. President Law, someone is here to see you. He paused slightly. Miss Moo. I looked up at him. Tell her I'm busy. She's already been waiting in the reception room for a while. I closed the file and stood up. 10 minutes. I wasn't surprised she came. Lately, she had been showing up more and more frequently, either coming to me directly, or creating chances to meet through trivial reasons. In the reception room, Laura sat very straight. She was dressed formally today, her makeup more refined than before. It was clear she had prepared deliberately. When she saw me enter, she immediately stood up. Ezekiel. I gestured for her to sit. Say what you need to say. Her gaze lingered on me for a moment. You've been spending a lot of time with Vanessa lately. I didn't answer right away. Is that something within your concern? I asked instead. Her expression shifted slightly, but she held back her emotions. I just heard about it. It seems like you two have gotten pretty close. Work-related, I said calmly. If there's nothing else, I have a meeting. She clearly hadn't expected that response. Her breathing faltered. You weren't like this before. Before, you wouldn't even refuse to explain things to me. I looked at her. That was under the premise that you weren't married. The moment those words fell, her face turned pale. Do you have to speak like that? I'm just reminding you of reality. She fell silent for a few seconds, then suddenly asked, in what way is she better than me? I frowned slightly. This isn't something to compare, but before, you only had eyes for me, she said, her voice low but filled with obvious unwillingness to accept it. And now you can so quickly have someone else by your side. It's not about replacing, I said. It's about standing in different positions now. Her fingers tightened, her nails almost digging into her palm. Were you already prepared for this? Were you just waiting for this day? I stood up. Laura, you didn't come here for answers. You came for confirmation. She looked up at me. Confirmation of what? Whether you've been replaced. But that confirmation won't help you in any way. Her eyes instantly reddened. I didn't say anything more and turned to leave. The moment the door closed, I heard her suppressed breathing. I didn't look back. Chapter 11. That night, she didn't contact me again, but I knew she wouldn't just stop there. Sure enough, a few days later, Fernando showed up downstairs at the company. It wasn't a formal visit. He was waiting in the parking lot. When I got off work, I saw him standing by the car, his expression clearly not in a good state. President Law, he spoke, his tone stiffer than before. Something you need? I asked. I want to talk to you. He glanced around. Just a few minutes. I checked the time. Go ahead. He clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct. He paused before continuing. You've been getting very close to Vanessa lately. This is affecting Laura a lot. I looked at him, not interrupting. She's emotionally unstable right now. You know what she's like. Yet you're still doing this. Isn't that a bit inappropriate? At that point, I finally found it somewhat ridiculous. Fernando, in what capacity are you saying this to me? His expression stiffened. I'm her husband. Then you should understand even more. I said coldly. Her emotions are related to you, not me. But you used to. That's over. I cut him off. It ended the day you got married. His breathing grew noticeably heavier. Do you think watching us like this gives you some kind of satisfaction? I looked at him. I don't have the time to revolve around your lives. Then why don't you disappear completely? His emotions finally snapped. Why do you still show up in her line of sight? I leaned against the car door and looked at him. Your unease right now isn't because of me. It's because you've realized she's started comparing. His expression turned ugly instantly. She's placing your lives side by side. The moment she sees differences, she wavers. That's not my responsibility. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I straightened up, ready to get into the car. I'll say this one last time. I'm not involved in your marriage. Don't come looking for me again. I got into the car and drove off. not giving him another chance to speak. After that day, Laura's messages became more urgent. They weren't questions, but explanations. Explaining her choices back then. Explaining Fernando's condition. Explaining her current situation. I didn't reply to a single one, not out of deliberate coldness, but simply because there was no need to respond. One night, very late, she called. I watched the screen light up, then go dark. I didn't answer. The next day, she sent a message. Can we talk properly? Just once. I replied with one sentence. There's no need. Chapter 12. That encounter wasn't deliberately arranged. It was a business banquet that had long been scheduled. The host was of high standing, and although not many people were invited, the guest list was concentrated enough. I arrived neither early nor late. The moment I stepped in, I sensed something subtle in the atmosphere. Quite a few gazes lingered on me for a second before quickly shifting away, as if confirming something. I didn't pay it any mind. I nodded to a few familiar partners and followed the waiter toward the inner hall. Vanessa had arrived before me. She stood near the main table, talking to someone. Her demeanor was composed, her tone calm and unhurried. She was dressed very restrained that day, a dark gown with clean lines, no unnecessary embellishments. When she saw me, she gave a slight nod. No wave. Northwest deliberate attempt to close the distance. I walked over to her side and naturally stopped. Just got here? I asked. She turned her head slightly toward me. Traffic was a bit heavy. We stood side by side. The posture was ordinary, but clear enough. That scene quickly drew attention from those around us. More people came over to exchange greetings. Some greeted me directly, while others smoothly shifted the topic toward her. President Law. And this is Vanessa, I said calmly. A partner, she added. Also a friend. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was perfectly measured. The other party immediately adjusted their attitude to something more respectful. That kind of shift needed no explanation. The position spoke for itself. Not long after, I saw Laura. She entered from a side door, holding Fernando's arm. Unlike last time, her makeup was refined today, and her outfit had clearly been carefully chosen. But the moment she walked in, her steps slowed noticeably. Her gaze quickly landed on Vanessa and me, and stopped. Fernando followed her line of sight, his expression changing instantly. He subconsciously straightened his back, but it only made him look more rigid. Laura quickly withdrew her gaze, as if forcing herself to stay composed, and continued walking forward with his arm. But the awkwardness couldn't be hidden. They were seated not far away, not close, but only a few tables apart, just enough to see, yet out of reach. Once the banquet began, everything proceeded as usual. Speeches, toasts, conversations. Throughout, I neither deliberately avoided them nor intentionally approached them. In some settings, there's no need to take initiative. Changes happen on their own. Vanessa and I exchanged a few brief comments, but more often we listened. She was very familiar with this kind of setting. She didn't compete for attention, but she didn't yield either. When someone tried to use a flirtatious tone to get closer, she responded politely and quickly steered the conversation back on track. That kind of composure left no room for criticism. I noticed Laura's gaze fall on her several times. Not hostility, but something more complicated, as if comparing or confirming something. Fernando clearly noticed it too. His mood had been off from the start. Someone came over to greet him and brought up his background. His smile stiffened noticeably. Mr. Fernando, I've heard a lot about you. I hear you did quite well with support from the Mu family. There was no malice in the statement, but to him, it landed like a thorn. That's all in the past, he replied, his tone slightly harsh. I have my own plans now. The other person paused, gave an awkward smile, and walked away. Laura said something softly, as if trying to soothe him, but he didn't seem to hear it. Instead, his gaze kept drifting in my direction. Chapter 13. Midway through the banquet, the host arranged a session for free networking. I had just finished speaking with a partner. As I turned around, my gaze met Laura's. She hesitated for a moment, but still walked over. Ezekiel. She stood in front of me, her voice steadier than before. Long time no see. We've seen each other, I replied flatly. At the parking lot last time. She paused for a second, then nodded. You seem in good condition today. Her eyes swept over me, then glanced at Vanessa beside me. Not bad, I said, offering no more. She fell silent for a few seconds, as if organizing her thoughts. Miss Vanessa. She turned to Vanessa. I've heard about you before. Vanessa looked at her, her expression calm. Miss Mu. She nodded. Nice to meet you. No extra emotion, no deliberate distance, just simple politeness. That kind of calmness, however, made it even harder for Laura to bear. She forced a smile. You two seem to get along well. At work, I added. Vanessa didn't refute it. She simply continued naturally. It makes things easier for both of us. The words were light, but solid. Laura's smile visibly faltered. She opened her mouth, about to say something, but Fernando interrupted from the side. What are you talking about? He walked over, standing beside her, his tone carrying obvious defensiveness. Nothing, Laura replied, her voice slightly unsteady. Fernando's gaze fell on me, unable to hide his emotions. President Law, he nodded. Didn't expect to see you here. Suitable occasion, I said. Is that so? He smiled, but it didn't look natural. I thought you'd deliberately avoid it. No need. His expression darkened immediately. You showing up like this now has quite an impact on her. His voice was low, but filled with emotion. I looked at him. Her feelings are yours to handle. You, Fernando. Laura cut him off, her tone urgent. Stop, but it was already too late. Several nearby gazes had been drawn over, realizing that Fernando's emotions only became harder to control. Do you feel satisfied seeing things like this now? He stared at me, suppressed anger in his eyes. I didn't respond. In a setting like this, explanations were unnecessary. Vanessa stepped half a step forward, standing beside me, not shielding me, nor confronting him. Just a natural position. This is a public setting, she said, her tone not heavy, but clear enough. If there are personal emotions, this isn't the place to deal with them. Fernando froze for a moment, clearly not expecting her to speak directly. At that instant, his pride was completely struck. What right do you? Enough. Laura's voice suddenly rose. Her expression had already turned unpleasant. The murmurs around them began to grow. Someone from the host approached, trying to ease the situation. Everyone, perhaps take a seat over there first. Fernando wanted to say more, but Laura grabbed him. Her hand was trembling. Let's go. She almost dragged him away. Before leaving, she turned back to look at me. There was no resentment in that look, no accusation, only complete collapse, as if she had finally realized that what she lost was never just a marriage, but a position she once stood in without question. The crowd gradually dispersed, and the atmosphere returned to normal. Vanessa looked at me. Do you want to leave early? No, I said. No need to disrupt plans because of someone else losing control. She nodded and didn't ask further. The banquet continued, but something had already collided silently beneath the surface. When Laura left, she was crying. Chapter 14. Laura didn't show up again for a long time. She didn't come to the company, nor did she try to reach me through anyone. This kind of silence wasn't sudden. Once the assumptions that hold a relationship together are broken, what remains collapses quickly. I heard about her situation casually at a dinner gathering. The tone was restrained, without exaggeration. It was only said that things on the Mu family's side hadn't been peaceful lately. The conflict between Fernando and the Mu family was no longer just private friction. It wasn't about money, but about attitude. He had begun to frequently emphasize independence, yet couldn't truly detach from the Mu family's resources. This contradiction made his emotions increasingly sharp. Caught in the middle, Laura realized for the first time that understanding alone couldn't solve everything. After hearing it, I didn't comment. That was no longer my life. My relationship with Vanessa became clearer after that. Not through deliberate progression, but naturally. Through many small details, she began to appear more frequently in my schedule. Sometimes for work, sometimes for personal arrangements, but no matter which, she kept a clear boundary between them. After one business trip, my flight was delayed. By the time I got home, it was already late, and there was a message from her on my phone. Got home, remember to rest. No excessive concern, no emotional burden, yet it made me pause and look at it for a long time. That feeling was unfamiliar. Not being needed, but being respected. One weekend, we went to the exhibition we had mentioned before. There weren't many people, and the environment was quiet. She walked beside me, occasionally stopping to look at the works carefully. Did you used to sacrifice a lot for others? She suddenly asked. I thought about it. I thought that was part of being in a relationship. She nodded, offering no judgment. A lot of people think that way, but in the long run, it easily becomes unbalanced. I looked at her. What about you? I value standing side by side more. She answered calmly, not who stands lower. At that moment, I suddenly understood why being with her felt so easy. Not because of anything she did, but because she never asked me to change my position. For a period afterward, I focused on an important project, busy to the point of constant rotation. She didn't complain, nor did she interfere with emotions. She simply stood where she should when I needed her. One night after a late meeting, I returned to the office and found her still there. She was sitting on the sofa, holding some documents. You didn't have to wait, I said. Was on the way. She stood up. Let's head back together. At that moment, I realized this was no longer just a simple working relationship. Our life rhythms had begun to overlap. Laura appeared again on an ordinary afternoon. I had just finished a meeting when my assistant knocked and said she was downstairs. I was silent for a few seconds, then asked for her to be brought up. She looked much more worn out. Her makeup was still refined, but it couldn't hide the fatigue in her eyes. You were willing to see me. I thought you wouldn't, she said as soon as she sat down. Time is limited. I glanced at my watch. Go ahead. Her hands rested on her knees, her fingertips slightly pale. Fernando and I have problems, she said directly. You're married, I replied calmly. That's something you should solve yourselves. Not all problems can be solved. She gave a faint, bitter smile. At least, I've realized now that I can't. I didn't respond. She looked up at me, her eyes carrying an almost shattered emotion. That day at the banquet, when I saw you two, I finally realized that what I once thought was a choice was actually childish. There's no point in saying this now. I cut her off. I know. She nodded. I'm not here to ask you to come back. That caught me off guard. Then what do you want? An answer. She looked at me. If I hadn't made that choice back then, would things have been different between us? I looked at her, without hesitation. No. She froze. It's not because of what happened later. It's because your choice at the time already said everything. Her tears finally fell. Not hysterical, just quietly streaming down. I always thought you would wait for me, she said softly. That was your judgment, I replied calmly. Not my promise. She covered her face, her shoulders trembling slightly. After a long while, she finally stood up. I understand now. She walked to the door, then paused. Are you happy now? I thought of Vanessa, of those moments that required no explanation. It fits, I answered. She nodded, said nothing more, and turned to leave. The moment the door closed, I felt no hesitation. Some answers, once spoken, are endings in themselves. A few months later, Vanessa and I got married. There was no extravagant ceremony, only our closest people were invited. That day, she stood by my side, calm and steady, not dependent, not yielding, but standing beside me. Standing there, I suddenly thought of who I used to be long ago. Someone who always stepped back, always tried to understand, always gave up his place. He was left in the past. Now, I know exactly what I want. Love isn't something earned by sacrificing your dignity. It's about choosing each other. I wasn't the one who was abandoned. I was the one who chose not to turn back.